Hey guys, let me know if you can hear me. It may sound a little bit louder than it usually does during my live streams. It's because I'm at Taco Cabana. Currently doing a live stream because this is where I'm going to be writing my paper tonight, and I need to be writing my paper because my paper that I have to write by midnight. It's going to be awesome. Go ahead and gather up your things to write with. These are things. It's going to be great. If you can't hear you, super hated that because I just made a lot of noises that were a little bit obnoxious. Well, let me know if there's anything specifically you guys want to be sure that we hit during this time. I've looked over my notes for this. I think it's gonna. I don't know if this is gonna take the whole hour. I'm hoping it takes about 40 minutes, and then we're gonna do the last 20 minutes going over women throughout history. One minute. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started as people continue to join. Please let me know if you have any questions as we kind of progress and as we go through this. We're going to start with kind of tracing how did America kind of get the politics we had. And this kind of covers periods 1 and 2. Well, let's kind of start with period 1 and kind of what, and I say period 1, it's like period 1-ish. So there's things that happened before the founding of America that really help shape who we are and what we believe and what we believe is important. One of the first things is in 1215, the Magna Carta is signed by King John. The Magna Carta is signed by King John. Essentially, we get the word I'm looking for. Magna Carta 1215, trial by jury. And this is one of the first documents that limits the power of a king. Now, Trial by jury is a jury is a jury of your peers, which means the people are taking a role in government. This idea of trial by jury is expanded in, I believe, 1680, 1689 in England in 1689 when they signed the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights also grants trial by jury, but also outlaws cruel and unusual punishment. Now, because people were used to their rights as Englishmen, when they come to the New World, they expect to have rights as well. Uh, and kind of throughout all of this is happening, remember that tied closely to this is the breaking of England from the Catholic Church. They start practicing Anglicanism. They become Anglican, which is a Protestant faith, protesting the Catholic Church. Thereby, when people come to the New World, we go to the New World in period two. When we get into the New World, we notice some things kind of start changing. Uh, in the New World, we're going to have uh, various documents that help us expand rights. Starting with in 1619, the House of Burgesses. We're going to have in 1620 the Mayflower Compact. Other examples of things I do not know the years for, and thereby I don't feel like they're fundamentally important, but the fundamental orders of Connecticut. The documents are important, the dates are not. Fundamental orders of Connecticut, the uh, religious toleration. It's like the Religious Toleration Act or something. It's in Maryland. I forget what it's called exactly. Uh, Early on, um, with kind of how strict the Puritans were, the Puritans create a society that rejects uniqueness. Things that are unique or different, they value sameness. Well, in the United States, we're going to find that that's going to be like a big oof. As a country that kind of embraces the rebel, we're a country that embraces things that look different and that are different or feel different. Uh, because of this, we have Rhode Island that gets started. And remember that the Puritans, you had to be a member of the church in order to vote. Um, if you were head of the church, you were also head of the government. That's like me trying to build the Capitol building. It's not a very good Capitol building. That's that. Thank you, Brianna. Trial by jury, limit the king. Back oath, Magna Carta. Your taxes go to the church. You have to, if you're a member of the church, that's the only way that you can vote. So all these things that Puritans are creating set up where the church and government are very closely tied. Where Rhode Island rejects that. They have separation of church and state. is established. We have Connecticut. That also comes out of this. And Connecticut is going to allow non-church members that are male to vote. And the FOC, that's what that is. It's the first written constitution in the New World. So all these kind of ideas very early on kind of establish this desire for representation, this need for representation, this belief that our views matter. We're used to having a king that respects our beliefs. We're used to having these things. Why shouldn't we have these just because we come to America? Well, then we have kind of leap into other things. The next thing we leap into is this kind of feeds us largely into the social movements that cause, again, a belief that we should be ruling ourselves in America. And there's a few key fundamental ideas here. So this is period 2, getting into period 3. Getting into period 3. Period 3, keep in mind, is like going to be a big one. This is probably going to take up the whole page, so just kind of be mentally prepared for that. So we have these big social movements that are happening, these kind of key things that are really forming our ideas. The first one being the First Great Awakening. The second being Enlightenment. Another, Salutary Neglect. And honestly, this is going to sound kind of silly, but just kind of like they're used to their rights as citizens. They're used to their rights as Englishmen. So these are kind of the big. Oh, Sabrina, where am I right now? I'm at Taco Cabana because I have to write my paper, and so that's kind of where it be sometimes. So in the First Great Awakening, we're going to see the significance here. I'm important to my God, therefore, I should be important to my government. Leaders of this are Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. Jonathan Edwards is the grandfather of Aaron Burr. George Whitefield was actually good friends with Benjamin Franklin, who is thought by some to have been agnostic, but George Whitefield very much put him in a position that he very much admired what George Whitefield did. George Whitefield focused a lot of efforts on helping the poor and the orphans. Dallas, I think you can pass the star. I have beliefs that you're going to be just fine. As far as enlightenment goes, enlightenment is this idea that it's the idea of having natural rights. You should have basic and natural rights. The government is created to protect the government. Its sole purpose is to protect your natural rights. And if the government doesn't do that, you have the right to rebel. Now, that said, this right here leader here of this John Locke. Little locked in thought, John. Um, First Great Awakening, Sabrina, is the one that inspires the revolution because I'm important to my God, so I should be important to my government. The Second Great Awakening inspires the reform movement. It's basically, people say there's something wrong with me. Um, I need to be fixed. I use religion to fix me because I can't. I'm capable of change. Then they look at society and say society needs to be fixed. Society is capable of change. We need to fix society. So the First Great Awakening is about the individual. The Second Great Awakening is about helping others. Salutary neglect is basically the king was far away. The king is far away. He's left the colonists alone. Guys, it's kind of like if you were in high school, your parents have granted you a certain amount of freedom, and then your senior year, they decide that your curfew is 8 p.m. You need to be in bed by 9, and that's just the way of it. The thing is, you're probably going to rebel because it feels like, even though they may not be doing it, it feels like they're taking away your rights. It feels like they're shutting you down. It feels like something's being taken away from you. Used to their rights as English citizens. This next part, this is because of the English Bill of Rights. This is because of Magna Carta. And also Parliament. They're used to having a legitimate say in their government. And in the New World, it doesn't seem like that's the case. And so they're used to their rights as English citizens, and it's not coming through the same way. So all of these kind of lead to, these are the ideas that spark revolution. Now, as these are the ideas that spark revolution, we have to kind of consider what does that mean, even in kind of a wider sense. And in a wider sense, what this means is, okay, I think that works. In a wider sense, what that means, I think this is going to get me to the right thing I need to look at. Okay. People believe that they are being, when they're being taxed without representation, when their rights are being infringed upon with the Quartering Act, the infringement of rights just in general, the infringement of rights, and really just like acts of violence are going to lead us into the American Revolution. So we fight the American Revolution. Initially, we established 1777. I think we ratified the Articles of Confederation, which do a few things. It sets aside, we have the land ordinance. Gives us land for public schools. And then we also have the Northwest Ordinance, which is really kind of like a gold mine of awesome things. It gives a Bill of Rights for settlers. It outlaws slavery. And creates a process for how a territory can become a state when it reaches 60,000 people. But the problem is that these are the only good things about the articles. I mean, one more good thing It gets us through the revolution. It gets us through the revolution, which is a good thing. However, largely, it is very weak. It doesn't have enough power to do the things that are required because it gives too much power to the states. And in giving too much power to the states, it really undermines the power of this whole governmental system. And we're on the verge pretty much of a breakdown, especially with the Farmers' Rebellion, States Rebellion that takes place. Guys, let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if you have questions and kind of want further understanding. How's this going for you? As Dallas would say, we don't want weak, we want strong. There you go. Good job, Dallas. So that will lead us to, and we're still in period 3 here, that is going to lead us to the Constitutional Convention. Now, to be fair, it actually leads to the Annapolis Convention, which leads to like the Mount Vernon Accords, which then leads us to the Constitutional Convention. And my favorite thing here is that it's Alexander Hamilton's idea, but he knows that no one will go for it if he like puts it out there. So he encourages James Madison to like have the idea or to kind of tell people about it. It's in 1787 in Philly, called by James Madison and Hamilton. All the colonies are there except for one. The one colony that is not there is Rhode Island, largely because they're Rhode Island and they think that everything's fine with the Articles, but the Articles, they don't have any way to tax people. If we want to change the Articles, every single state has to agree, which is ridiculous. And if you want to pass a law, it takes 9 out of 13 states to agree. It's just rough. Also has like no way to like draw a military. It's not a great look. They decide that they're going to meet in secret. So this is a big secret meeting. It's a secret meeting with the idea that whatever is said here, whatever we decide, we're going to let people speak freely so we can have the freedom of ideas so that nobody has to worry about not sharing an idea because what if people don't like it and then I'm humiliated for the rest of my life. And so it is here that they come up with several different plans. We have the New Jersey plan. Then we have the Virginia plan. This one, representation is by population in Virginia. New Jersey, representation is equal for all states. Essentially, we combine these two ideas in what is known as the Great Compromise. That's kind of pulled together by Roger Sherman. Where we create 2 houses, an upper house, which representation is equal for all states, so that would be the Senate. And then the lower house, which is a lot bigger, but a little bit weaker, where representation is determined by population. Here's the 2 houses. This one has 435 members. This one has 100 members. In total, there are 535 members of Congress, because these make up Congress. which is our legislative body. The House, the one that's determined by population, that's the House of Representatives. Now, the problem is that when it's time to make this known, when it's time to when it's time to go out and share, and also, sorry, real quick, our bad news bear thing compromise we come to, we have two of them. We have the 3/5 compromise, which says for the purposes of taxation and representation, slaves shall count as 3/5 a person, as well as the Commerce Compromise, which says we will not outlaw slavery we will not discuss slavery until 1808. Of slavery or the slave trade is halted until 1808. Sabrina, are you good? I tried to move my paper up a little. There was just nothing really written up there, so there's that. And some might argue that the 3/5 compromise is the reason that of our first 5 presidents, 4 of them or 3 of them come from Virginia. Of our first 5 presidents, 3 come from Virginia. Actually 4, sorry. 4 come from Virginia, yes. Because first presidents go Washington, Adams, whoa, yikes, Jefferson, Monroe, or Madison, wow, and Monroe, Virginia, 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 Virginia. Guess who has most votes? Guess who has most representation in Congress? Virginia. Therefore, it says the Electoral College is also determined by the number of votes you have in these two combined. They also have the most votes in Congress, or in the Electoral College as well. We're going to get to women, Sabrina, kind of towards the end. If there's time, I'm trying to get through this piece first. So looking here, this is where we at. Adams is from Massachusetts, in case you're wondering, which is another large state. So at the end of Washington's presidency, so everybody goes home. People go home after the convention. After the convention, they go home, and we're going to try to convince our legislatures. We're convincing the states to ratify. In convincing the states to ratify, we have a few key points we need to focus on. We have 2 groups that form, the Federalists and the AntiFederalists. Federalists support, as you may note, a strong federal government. They write a series of essays titled The Federalist Papers. This is John Jay, Hamilton, and Madison. In fact, Hamilton has to work really hard because his home state of New York, when they get to the Constitutional Convention, they actually, New York sends 3 delegates. Since Hamilton calls the convention, he has to be there. And so they send 2 people, mostly just to outvote him because they just think he's such a nincompoop. But when it becomes clear that this is not, we're not trying to ratify the articles, we're actually trying to change the whole government, um, those people get mad, and so they leave. Those two guys get mad, so they leave. The Anti-Federalists are led by Patrick Henry. Like Mercy, Otis, Warren, and largely kind of what they're going to want. They want a Bill of Rights. They fear the oppression under the king. And like Patrick Henry, Mercy, Otis, Warren, I believe they're also both from like Massachusetts, which is kind of where the hotbed of revolution started. And so because of that, we get into, because of this, we jump into the Bill of Rights. In 1789, actually, enough states have passed it to where it's going to be ratified. Not all the states formally ratify it until 1791 after the Bill of Rights is added. But our Bill of Rights are essentially divided into 3 different sections. Okay, so we have one which is RAPS. Freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. The 5 freedoms. Number 2 is the right to bear arms. Three is no quartering of soldiers in times of peace. And then number 4 is no unlawful search and seizure. So this refers to Lexington and Concord, where the colonists were trying to set up militia, therefore they had their own arsenals of weapons, and the British tried to take them. This is addressing the Quartering Act. This is just injustice in general, faced by the colonists. And this refers to the writs. Wow, that's a rough look right there. The writs of assistance, where the king basically gave his guards, his soldiers, permission to just search anything they saw fit. So these all address grievances. These all address grievances we had with the king. Those are the first 4. The next 4 are what I refer to as the due process amendments. These are amendments for the rights of the accused. This one says that you have the right to due process and no self-incrimination. Because you can't lie under oath, they can't force you to speak in a way that would make you guilty. Number 6, you have the right to a speedy trial. 7, trial by jury. And 7, no cruel or unusual punishment. Now, this may seem kind of silly. I feel like these are the amendments that not all kids think of a whole lot in terms of why are these so important. But in governments where the people are highly oppressed, there is no due process. When you're accused of a crime, you immediately are punished. And in the United States, you should be accused of a crime. Once you're accused of the crime, you have to be formally accused of it. You're brought before You're brought before a judge. Once you're brought before the judge decides what the charges will be. You have to be formally charged. You have the right to an attorney. You get an attorney. There's all these different things. There's a process the law has to follow before you can be declared guilty. And you have the right to speak for yourself. You have the right to trial by jury. And all of these things are before we determine if there's going to be a punishment for you. So in oppressive governments, it goes accusation, punishment. In places where you have due process, it goes accusation, due process, and then whatever the consequence of that is. Whether it's you're found guilty, so nothing happens, or you're not. 9 is rights not enumerated, which basically means you have so many rights, we can't put a number on them. So don't think that if the right's not listed here, that means you don't have it. Know that you do have rights outside of these listed here. And the 10 is any rights not listed in the Constitution are left up to the states and the people. This is a huge one for as far as states' rights go. This is the one that people who are proponents of states' rights really cling to. Does this make sense? Any questions about these? Any questions? Okay. So next up, so we have Washington as president. Washington is selected unanimously. Washington becomes president, and he creates a cabinet. The problem is that within his cabinet, factions start to build. So within this cabinet, 2 factions start to build. Specifically, we have his cabinet, which is his group of advisors. Essentially, they're divided into Hamilton and his Federalists, and Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans. Now, keep in mind throughout pretty much the war, after the war, during the war, Jefferson spent most of his time in France. Articles of Confederation, Jefferson's in France, living it up. The problem is he's in France watching the French kind of engage in their own revolution of sorts. And he's like, guys, the French, though, they got this. They're really good. Like, man. And he really feels this impassioned kinship with the French. He believes that the French are our brothers in revolution. We should follow them. That's what we should do. He wants us to be, they support the French. They want artisan farmers. They have the support of artisan farmers. Agriculture is the industry in which they support. Small federal power. Whereas Federalists, they want us to align ourselves with Britain. Now, what I didn't say before is that Hamilton, at the Constitutional Convention, stands up and gives a 6-hour speech, essentially about how we should set up this new government that is all we should set up a new government, and the new government's going to be like a monarchy, and this person's going to rule until they die. And basically, it leads everyone to say that Hamilton is this monarchist. Well, truth be told, he writes 51 essays outlining why the Constitution is so awesome, and yet people still are like, oh, he's a monarchist. That's why he likes Britain. Monarchy. Yikes. They support businesses. They have the support of New England. Um, they have the support of merchants. They want a national bank. And they want power to kind of be centralized. Oh, goodness. What do I do? Okay. Jefferson believes in civil liberties, and we just need to trust the people. Trust the common man. Whereas Federalists are going to value order and stability because that is what will give us strength. Now, this kind of starts to happen, and Washington sees the writing on the wall, and in his farewell address, he warns against political parties. He warns against political parties. He says political parties will surely divide our nation. People will stop caring about the good of the whole and only care about regional interests and only care about the support that their parties can offer. But essentially what happens is the first two-party system forms over several political conflicts during Washington's presidency. The French Revolution, whether or not the U.S. should support England or France. Jefferson even resigned his post as Secretary of State because he was so mad about Washington not supporting the French, even though they supported us during our revolution. Alliances and political parties were the two most dangerous forces in Washington's view. Therefore, that's why he warns against them here. Now, if you listen to Hamilton, the second cabinet battle is all about the French Revolution, and essentially what Hamilton's argument is, he goes, Jefferson said, we made a promise, we signed a treaty when we needed money and half a chance. Who provided us funds? France. Hamilton says, we signed a treaty with a king whose head is now in a basket. Would you like to take it out and ask it? Should we honor our treaty king Louis's head? Do whatever you want. I'm super dead. And basically, which was basically out of this, Washington says, Hamilton is right. We're too fragile to start another fight. They don't even have a leader. He says the people are leading. The people are rioting. People are leading. The people are rioting. And he like looks at Jefferson. He's like, frankly, I find it a little disquieting that you would let your ideals be blind you to reality. And didn't Hamilton rip up Jefferson in the rap battle? Yeah, he did. The first rap battle about the National Bank is like the most bomb. Listen to guys, like if you really want like a good solid review of those first parts of history, go ahead and like look at Hamilton, watch Hamilton things, listen to Hamilton things, do all the things. Okay. So essentially in the early 1800s, and this kind of again we have our first two-party system. The Marshall Court is basically, so, rewind. After Washington's presidency, Adams is elected. Then we have our first peaceful transition of power when power transitions from from Adams to Jefferson. Um, but one of the important things here too is during Adams' presidency. Adams replaces John Jay. He replaces John Jay as the leader of the Supreme Court, and we have a new leader of the Supreme Court. Our new leader of the Supreme Court is John Marshall. John Marshall is a real big stinking deal. John Marshall's Supreme Court does a lot of things. A few of the things that it does. Marshall's Supreme Court, it grows the federal government. It grows the federal government. In any given moment, we're gonna find we have okay. So I'm gonna show you guys what I've been using, and I'm gonna give you guys a link to it in a few minutes. I got all this from this one website. I don't really know what you can see though, so I'm gonna try to. I'm wondering how this is gonna look to you. So I'm zooming it in. We're gonna see how that actually works because you can't see anything right now. So let me zoom out. I'm trying to do zooming things here, and it's not really working. Okay, well, let's see here. Okay. By refrain, Dallas means that he is playing video games and he has things to do. Join us again soon. So essentially with these court cases review, I want it to focus better. Sorry guys, I just tried to make it focus better. We'll see if it works. Trying to zoom in on it. Be better, focus better. See it better. Can you see it? It's so hard to see. This is ridiculous. And people are gonna be like, what is this part of Miss Puckett's live stream that she's just holding this paper of blurry words? So essentially what all this does, okay, I'm just gonna get rid of this. That's done. Y'all, I tried real hard. That was just big dumb. So Marshall's Supreme Court, it does a few things. Largely what we're going to see, though, is that he grows the power of the federal government. In the first big case is Marbury v. Madison. It's Marbury v. Madison. We have McCulloch v. Maryland. Some of you are like, why are your M's different? I don't know, kids. I don't know. Gibbons v. Ogden. Dartmouth v. Woodward. Okay, here's what you need to know. Judicial review, the Supreme Court gets to declare laws unconstitutional. McCulloch v. Maryland. States can't tax the federal government. Gibbons versus Ogden. Federal trade overrules state trade as far as permits go. Dartmouth v. Woodard. This one is about like upholding the sanctity of contracts. Which is to say that states are required to hold up the sanctity of their contracts to private institutions. Now, just what's important to know here is that in all of these cases, the federal government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And just like a small child, during the early republic, during this kind of early time in our nation's history, we're still working out the kinks of our government. Okay. Okay. So then we kind of get into our two-party system. With the death of the Federalist Party at the Hartford Convention during the War of 1812, we have the rise of the Whigs. So our second two-party system refers specifically to yikes. Democrats and the Whigs are part of our second kind of tier of governments. Basically, the first two-party system ended in 1850 with the death of the Federalist Party, followed the Hartford Convention, and resolutions, at least at the national level. And the beginning of the era of good feelings, when only one party, the era of the Founding Fathers, was basically over after that. Following the corrupt bargain in 1824, the next party system began to form, with Democrats rallying behind Andrew Jackson, who was robbed of the 1824 presidential victory. It takes almost 2 decades for the Whigs to fully form, which provided the opposing party to Jackson's Democrats. Both parties claimed to be heirs of the Jeffersonianism. Okay. So the next two-party system we have is Democrats versus Whigs. So Democrats are the party of tradition. They look to the past. They spoke to the fears of Americans. They oppose the National Bank, Paris, federally funded internal improvements via the 10th Amendment. They preferred individual choice. They want rapid territorial expansion over space by by purchase or war. They want to move further out west. They believed in progress through external growth. The democratic ideology of agrarianism, slavery, states' rights, and territorial expansion favored the South. So basically, their ideology was centered. Ooh, I can't see. You can't see anything I'm writing now. Um, their ideology is agrarian, states' rights, territorial expansion. All of this, oh, and slavery, all this favored by the South. So then we have the Whigs. So alternatively, this is the party of modernization. They want to use federal money and state governments to promote economic growth. Government to support economic growth. They advocated reforms such as temperance, public schools, prison reform. They favored industry and urban growth. They favor gradual territorial expansion as opposed to like the Mexican American War. They believed in progress through internal growth. Basically, the Whig ideology was centered around urbanization, federal rights, industrialization, and commercial expansion, which is largely favored by the North. Now, as this kind of begins to kind of fade out and end, we're going to see that two-party system. We kind of hit in the mid 19th century. We hit, which is like mid 1800s, because of all the territorial expansion. We have another like little political crisis here. Um, we have a political crisis at hand, um, and it's mostly because of it's basically as disputes over slavery and the territories first erode, then destroy what would become America's second two-party system. Erosion began in the 1840s as various factions opposed to Jacksonian Democratic political coalition. Then we have all these new parties start to form. So kind of the new parties that come out of the debates, of all the debates, we have the Liberty Party. We have the Free Soilers, the Whigs, or the end of, and the American Party. Okay, so um, so they run the Liberty Party is an abolitionist. They run abolitionist candidate James Burney for president, 1844. They only get 2% of the votes, but essentially they pull votes from the Whigs, helping end the Whigs Party. The Free Soilers, they're not abolitionists, but opposed to expansion. They oppose expansion of slavery. They win 10% of the popular vote with Martin Van Buren as their candidate in 1848. They lose 50% of their support in 1852 when their candidate repudiated the Compromise of 1850. So they had all this kind of oomph moving forward, but it did not end well for them. Van Buren was one. The end of the Whigs. So basically, they split over slavery into two different groups. The Southern Cotton Whigs, who eventually drifted to the Democratic Party, and the Northern Conscience Whigs, who moved to new parties, i.e. the Free Soil Party, and later into the Republican Party. And then there's the Know Nothing Party. So the Know Nothing Party, also known as the American Party, which party had the log cabin campaign? That would be the Whigs, because that was in response to people supporting Jackson so much that they run William Henry Harrison, the log cabin campaign. They're nativists. They run Millard Fillmore in 1856 and win 21% of the popular vote. They eventually get absorbed into the Republican Party. Sorry, guys, hold on. So the next thing that happens is increasing numbers of Americans, many inspired by all these kind of different movements that are happening. That's not it. That's not what this is. So essentially, we have the Republican Party. Our next two-party system is election of 1860 creates two political parties again. We have Republicans and we have Democrats. It's formed in 1854 when a coalition of independent Democrats, Free Soilers, and Conscience Whigs united in opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Stressed to free labor as opposed to the extension of slavery in the territories, free soil, free labor, free men. Moderates like Abraham Lincoln could therefore oppose slavery on moral grounds as wrong, while admitting that slavery had a right to exist where the Constitution originally allowed it to exist. John Fremont is the first Republican presidential candidate in 1856. He does not win. Lincoln does. And essentially in the election of 1860, Republicans by this time, and overtly sectional and decidedly opposed to slavery, draw mostly Northerners within a platform of favoring a Homestead Act, a protective tariffs, and transportation improvements. They oppose expansion of slavery. But defended the rights of states to control their own domestic institutions. Lincoln is nominated as the presidential candidate on the third ballot and wins the 1860 election with 39% of the vote, and he's not on any of the Southern ballots. They want Homestead Act and then internal improvements. Democrats, they split at its 1860 convention. Charleston, South Carolina, when a platform defending slavery was defeated, and the Deep South delegates walked out. Stephen Douglas of Illinois is nominated as the presidential candidate on a platform of opposing any issue with slavery that Congress has. And John Breckinridge runs in the north of Kentucky, runs on a pro-slavery platform. Stephen Douglas wants to avoid Congress interference. Again, Lincoln gets 39% of the votes, and he's not even on the ballots in the South. Once the Civil War ends, we're going to see a slew of other things kind of take place. Also, within all these like slavery issues that are happening, one important court case that we didn't talk about, Chief Justice Roger Taney. Be sure you know Dred Scott. Be sure you know Dred Scott v. Sanford. That is correct, Madeline. South Carolina gets out of town after Lincoln is elected. South Carolina is donezo. All right, y'all. Here's the issue. I really have to write my paper, but I'm going to give you guys a link to the thing that I used. But first, let's beat Sumner with his own cane. Yes, Sabrina, don't forget that happens also because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, bleeding Kansas, which essentially gets rid of the Free Soilers and kind of leads to the creation of the Republican Party. It's a big oof. Lots of oofs are happening here. So here's what I'm going to do, y'all. I'm going to give you guys a link to the notes that I've been using. We got through 1860, but the site that I found that has all of this stuff on it is really incredible. The teacher has done a wonderful job of creating a really solid review. Politics and Power is what we were looking at today. Okay, so that is that. That is the link to the notes I was using today. But her review materials for APUSH in general are here. Sabrina, you say I have to do one-pagers tonight. Sabrina, if you need to wait, if you honestly, like, study for the AP test. AP test to me is more important. If you want to do those over the weekend and turn those in, I hate to say it over the live stream of the things, but I care more about you studying for the AP test and feeling really good about that. But I do recommend you can use these different reviews for that, for your one-pagers as well, kind of to help guide some of your thinking. Anything else I can share with you? Anything else you want to know? Keep in mind, like, this review is like super duper thorough. Like, I'm looking over it and I'm like, that's a lot of things. That's a lot of detail. And the details are important. The details are going to help you sometimes, but just know it's a long test. There's a lot happening. Dumber than you have succeeded here, my friends. Any other questions before I go? Dred Scott basically called a piece of furniture. Pretty much. Dred Scott, they say, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Mr. Dred Scott. You're not a person, you're a property. Properties can't have feelings. It's a whole thing. But anyways, y'all, I'm gonna head out and blow this popsicle stand. But you guys have a wonderful evening. Rest up in plenty of time for your AP for your STAR test tomorrow. Good luck. You guys are gonna do awesome.